Hello, David Hyner here again. I get asked by my small business clients that I coach and mentor, as well as my colleagues in my mastermind groups, how do we get in front of corporates? Now, I speak at corporate conferences and events, but I don't as such trade with corporates, a product or a big service. So I thought, who does? Who can help me answer these questions? My brother Adrian Hyner, whereas I worked in small businesses, he worked in the corporate world. He ran a couple of divisions of 3M over many, many years, did very, very well in marketing. And, well, he's very well placed to give us advice on what they like, what they don't like, how to approach them, how not to approach them, some of the things they don't like about working with small businesses, and the things they love working with small businesses. This is just a taster. If you like what we've done, please tell us. We'll consider even making a video course on the subject to really help us. But for now, let's have a listen to what Adrian says and see if you can take anything of value to help you get what you offer in front of bigger clients.
I'm doing this interview to try and answer a few questions for you by having a chat with my brother Adrian. So I'm not going to tell you his CV. Adrian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Okay, thank you, David. A couple of minutes bio then. I've basically worked in corporate world most of my life for Japanese, German, British, and mostly American companies. The industries I've predominantly worked in are electronics and telecom, but I've got experience in one or two others and have traveled around various continents working as well. More latterly, I've been consulting with an Airbnb hosting business, so involved in the software and obviously disruptive industry markets. My last job was with the corporation 3M and had quite a few years with them and wound up as general manager of the electronics division.
I have to get used to you calling me David then, because I only get called that when I'm in trouble. So, Adrian, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just quick fire some questions at you. Feel free to say I don't know, or I can't answer it, or I don't want to. But I know you're responsible for sort of a couple of divisions in a marketing capacity in major corporates. Let's see what you can answer for these. So the most popular question asked was, how is it best to approach larger organizations? Is it in a try and organize a face-to-face meeting? Is it in an introductory email? Is it online using LinkedIn or social media approaches? Is it lumpy mail or a letter? Is it picking up the telephone? And what's the answer to that?
Okay, let's start off with the don'ts. On the whole, I would not recommend trying to contact people through LinkedIn unless you're a first contact. People do get quite annoyed at trying to being accessed for selling activity on LinkedIn. However, you can use LinkedIn by joining groups. So obviously understanding the right groups to join. If you know the name of the individual you're targeting, obviously that helps, and you can find out what links they're what groups they're associated with. So that's a do, obviously. Mail probably goes in the bin, may not even get to the right person, and in any case, we're coming back to the thing that you need to have a named person. You can't send in generic posts to a corporate. That would never work. The other thing that would pay dividends is really understanding where the corporates are coming from and really understanding what you're trying to promote. Is it a service? Is it software? Is it a product? Is it an invention? And once you are clear on what you're offering and your USP, as it were, then you can go and do your research on the corporation and be clear on where your product fits and therefore who you need to be contacting. I would always say trade shows are a useful point of contact. I know you're mostly going to come into contact with engineers, sales guys and marketers, but very often they're decision makers. So
how come?
Well, it depends on the kind of company, but most corporates are trying to be game changers. They're trying to lead the market and create markets. Therefore, their innovation matters to them. But what happens quite frequently is as they grow into a market, then they need gap filling products or services. And it's the marketers who very often are the first point of contact for that kind of thing. If you're offering a service or a consultancy or legal services, then that's more, let's call it a kind of consumable for the business to make the company run better. And in that case, you might want to get in touch with engineers or factory managers or the purchasing department. Ordinarily, you probably want to avoid the purchasing department because they're focused on driving costs down. Not normally the first point of contact.
That's a really valid point. That's a really valid point. So you suggest we go to trade fairs to connect, which a lot of small businesses don't bother going to exhibitions and trade fairs anymore. That's a good call.
Sorry, David, just to be clear, I don't mean you have to have a stand there. I just mean go and talk to people.
Yeah, the old school face-to-face, have a conversation. Yeah, love it. Let's flip it. So where do large companies look for new suppliers and innovation?
Okay, so big corporations work on a horizon, by which I mean they're looking 10 years out and they're making strategic decisions around the markets that they think are going to grow biggest and best, and that suits their portfolio and their capabilities over the next 5 to 10 years. So if you are in that space, so pick an example: clean air, clean water, very high-end strategic directions. Now, that kind of research on behalf of the corporation will influence companies they may want to purchase, products they might want to develop, or services. And equally, you need to understand where they're headed in order to see if your product fits. Coming back to this thing about researching again. So you need to understand where you fit against their strategic direction. And there are plenty of online financial analysts who will, if you go onto most corporates, you'll get different financial analysts saying what they think of their company, where they think they're headed. The annual report will also have some indicators.
True.
And the company also put out, because obviously they've got shareholders to look after, they will put out information on which geographies are growing, which kind of market sectors are robust.
Okay. And out of any approach that you've ever experienced, what would you say is something that is likely to grab attention? What gets their attention?
I think a person or company that approaches them professionally and thoughtfully, and you don't blunder in. You basically do your homework. Again, a kind of peripheral point is that most, if not all, corporates these days are very ethically and sustainably driven. So one of the, maybe not the first question they'll ask, but if you're going to get to the point where you are offering them something, you've got to have watertight information around how your company operates ethically and sustainably, because they will ask.
Even for a sole trader, for example.
I think, well, but less so for a sole trader, to be honest. But I think anything you can think of, I think you've got to have that mindset. Is the point? I think if you've
got a statement, it only helps.
Even better if your product idea, whatever, is a service is helping them achieve an ethical or sustainable goal. Even better.
Marketing 101: be the paracetamol to their headache. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a couple of quick fire questions for you. In terms of the style of communication, do they prefer direct or relationship?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So
what do you mean by direct?
Very pragmatic, let's do business, or do they prefer a relationship built?
I think if you are fulfilling a potential need they have, then it's about being direct and being business-like and making sure the numbers stack up, making sure it fits for them. They'll obviously be interested in security of tenure or supply as well. That's quite important. Yeah, directness and being succinct and to the point is key. The relationship comes later. I think you could wait for ages to get the right relationship. What you do need to do is to find the key influencers.
Absolutely. We'll come to that one. Okay, so in terms of engagement, let's just say that you've expressed an interest after an approach I made. It's a long process. In terms of the contact that we would have with you, would you prefer an occasional drip contact, something regular? And is there a means? Do you prefer an email, a letter, a telephone call every now and again, or do you prefer just to be left alone and you'll come to us when you want us?
What you've just described doesn't sound like you've got a very strong proposition. I think if you have a dialogue with someone in the organisation, whether it's on email or by phone or at a trade show, they probably would give you a very clear idea on when they would next want to talk to you, or whether indeed they do want to talk to you at all, whether there's a fit.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't suggest a drip feed approach of any kind unless they've indicated that they absolutely want, potentially want what you've got. And bear in mind, unless you've got something totally unique, you'll have competition.
Yeah.
And understand where you stand on that front.
And that reinforces your earlier points. It's all about having a strong proposition, understanding their needs before you make the approach. Mm-hmm. So going strong, going with a professional approach, but keep it succinct. Okay. How would we encourage buyer now? Because this comes from a couple of questions we had around people saying that when they were speaking to procurement in particular, that the process to make a decision was so long because of the channels I had to go through. Is there any top tip you could give us for helping them to make a quicker decision?
No, in a word.
Yeah, that's okay.
You've got to face the fact that corporates are behemoths. They have process and procedures, and they will follow those. It may not be to your liking that they will take time, but they will take time. I think the key to this is once you have them on your hook, as it were, and you got something, then be patient and keep it professional. You won't rush them, I promise you.
Okay, let's say, okay, I've got a widget or a service that I want to promote to you. Let's just say I was approaching your old organization, old employer, and you've got so many thousands of people globally. How would you suggest we start to even find the right person to speak to?
Definitely LinkedIn, because you can do a lot of research on LinkedIn, and you're never very far from a contact if you're working in an industry that they're interested in. And for sure, the big corporates have got people who cover all aspects of the manufacturing through to sales and marketing, engineering, legal, whatever. So build up a picture as far as you're able of who works there and who might be potentially of interest to you. Certainly the marketing department can be key, and it's often the young enthusiastic marketers who kind of get into these companies who have the bright ideas and are focused on expanding portfolio. And because I've talked about the horizon that big corporates look at, and obviously that informs their investment decisions. However, they've got to deliver to shareholders in the short term. So they're always on the lookout on making money from expanding their portfolio if there's a fit.
Okay. And also, I mean, one thing small businesses are good at is networking. And as you say, you can go onto LinkedIn, find somebody else in the organization and ask their opinion on who would be the best person to speak to, and can they afford introductions. So, okay. How can we I mean, you've mentioned marketeers. Now, you mentioned this to me before as well, because you say identify their needs, and yes, their end of year statement, that can hold some key, their website, of course, speaking to people. How else can we identify what their more pressing or urgent needs might be?
As I say, their annual financial statements normally set out their strategic direction. Also, the analysts, the financial analysts, you can go on to any number of websites, and in fact, if you went onto a corporate website, they will normally share with you analysts' views on their very own company. So. Also, you know where your product or service fits, so make sure you understand in that particular market, in that space, that you have something special to offer. You're clear on where you fit, and sometimes the corporation may not know that they want your product or service. So if you're clear on where you fit, and you can see that there's a convergence between what you have available and where the corporation is or is going to or may go to, that's where obviously there's a bit more work involved in selling something that they don't know they want yet. But if you've got something that's unique and that's special, then yeah, you definitely need to get in front of people. That's not something that you want to be second or third hand contacting them by.
Thank you. Now, the next question is a bit of a soft question, but actually it cropped up more than I thought it would when I asked my colleagues what would they want me to ask you. And I'm putting words into their mouth here, but effectively they're saying, how can we stop feeling terrified of approaching corporates? Now, I put the label of imposter syndrome on that.
Yeah.
Get over it, nut up. If you've got something of value, approach them. But what advice would you give to a sole trader or a small business who's got something of value, genuinely could make a difference? What would help them to approach?
I think that if you genuinely have something that you believe is of value, you need to hold a mirror up to yourself, first of all, and be sure that it actually is of value. Because sometimes, you can imagine what you've got is the best thing since sliced bread, but in the cold light of reality, isn't. So comes back to research again. If you're certain and a lot of companies these days are totally data driven. I mean, you've heard this with the pandemic.
Yeah.
In the end, it's come down to a political decision, but they're guided by the data and the science. A lot of companies are actually guided by data. So if you've got data that proves or underpins your proposal, then that certainly helps and should give you the confidence to say that you've got the best thing since sliced bread.
That is in fact, I can reinforce that, Adrian, because right now I'm having a chat with a very large corporation in financial services, and I was actually given the heads up that the person looking at this proposal is data driven. So I pulled out all the stats, percentages, results, and case study, and we're at stage 2. So that is really important. That was great advice. Now, I'm happy for you to answer this question as nicely or as brutally as you wish. But in your opinion, and for everyone watching or listening to this, it is Adrian's opinion. It's not necessarily global truth. But what is corporate's opinion, or would you say is the reputation of most small and micro businesses from a corporate perspective?
I can, again, it's my opinion. I think, or my experience, is that I recall working at 3M where we've spoken to inventors who were developing stuff in their garage, and it wasn't a company. I don't think he was even a sole trader. He was just an ideas guy.
Yeah.
So I would never think that, or you should never think that you you don't put up artificial barriers. I mean, if the ideas sound and you get attention, then go for it.
Fantastic. And this is one of my questions. Now, I've had very mixed experiences of working with corporates. Some say we pay 90 or 120 days. Some will say, oh, we pay 90 to 120 days until I point out my contract terms and I'm saying no. And then all of a sudden I can get paid in advance. So just how rigid are most corporates' payment terms? Because 120 days is just not financially viable for most small businesses.
Not. No. Everything's negotiable at the end of the day. Everything's negotiable. You need to understand just how important your business opportunity is to them in the end. If it's peripheral, actually, is there anything that is worth having? If you ought to, in theory, be on a strong footing if when it comes to negotiating your terms. That said, there's always a quid pro quo. So be flexible, by which I mean, don't give them 120 days or even 90 days, but understand that the cash flow has a consequence for you and for them. And there are things that you might be able to offer that are of low value to you that you can give them that are high value to them, that isn't cash related necessarily. A bit of extra service or a bit of, I don't know, delivery or so. If you've got something in your gift to oil the wheels that isn't cash based, but it gets you better payment terms, consider that. So think of all the elements that go to make up the cost of servicing the business. If your margins are high enough, which obviously you want that to be, maybe you can afford it, but no one wants to be paid on 90 days plus terms.
I have to say that's actually a superb answer, and it's not what I was expecting. I was expecting you to say, no, they're very strict most of the time, whereas actually what you're saying makes a lot of sense and can genuine value. I mean, I can give an example there. In the education sector where I work, sometimes they can't afford to hire a speaker out of their training or learning budget, but they have a huge budget for stationery. So I sell them some books and speak for nothing.
Right.
Theoretically.
There you go. Yeah, well, that's a good example, yeah.
Or I will say, this is my speaking fee, but they get this bundle of audio and video resources for every delegate free of charge posted. So this kind of thing, it's nice to hear that they're actually far more flexible than most small businesses perceive them to be.
And yeah, let's be clear, it's not in all cases, and it's a good idea to have got to that discussion point before you hit purchasing department, because they're kind of autonomous. Computer says no, and I think but think it through, because certainly I've been in many a meeting where we will analyse what it costs us for every 30 days a payment. In fact, we were looking at the other way. We were looking at paying. What's the opportunity of paying on 15 days terms, and what can we get out of it?
So, okay, this is just off my feet now. So would you suggest that we perhaps put as part of our quotations that
no?
Okay, so wait.
No, start off with standard terms.
Right.
Everything is negotiated. If you give away too much to begin with, you're on a downward spiral then.
Put a target on yourself. Okay. Yeah. Adrian, fantastic answers to some interesting questions. If people are interested in potentially Adrian and I creating a course for you, please pop some information in the comments box below. we've also got the opportunity potentially to have someone from another member of our family who's quite senior in the government to talk about government contracting and working with large local authority contracts. So if you're interested in this, let us know. Hope this has served you. Let us know which particular thing you're going to act upon below. Adrian, thank you very much for your time, brother.
All right, take care.
Cheers.